They sold me to a number, not a person. A paddle with inked digits lifted, a bell chimed, and the room clapped like it had just bought a racehorse instead of someone with a pulse and a heartbeat that wouldn't slow down. Light bled from the ceiling, white, clinical, the kind of brightness that refuses shadows. My name wasn't called. Omegas don't need names here, just measurements and guarantees. A barcode the length of a little finger. Lot 27, the auctioneer purred. Elite compatibility. Proven cycles. Certified temperament. Temperament. As if terror makes you docile by design. I kept my chin level and my eyes somewhere safe. On the screen where my price climbed. Digit by digit, like a countdown to an execution that promised silk gloves. The buyers were silhouettes, cologne and cufflinks. Wealth in a hush, so practiced it sounded like kindness. I didn't look at faces. You don't make it easier to haunt yourself. Sold. The gavel struck. The number on the screen froze. That was how much my life cost today. Hands, sanitized, professional, unlocked the display cuffs from my wrists. The handler's voice was a needle threaded through velvet. Congratulations, Tian. I smiled with my teeth tucked away. Do I get a party hat? He didn't dignify sarcasm. They never do. You'll be transported. No trouble. Trouble. I had plenty of it, but none that would help. They guided me off the platform and through a corridor that smelled faintly of citrus and antiseptic, like they were proud of how clean they kept the cages. In the mirror by the exit, I caught a slice of myself, too thin, hair grown out uneven, a jaw clenched into permanent readiness. My eyes were the only part I recognized, sharp, mean, at the edges. Survival makes knives where softness used to be. Outside, night had pressed its forehead to the city, bright with the long, blinking grief of traffic. The car that pulled up was black, the windows dark enough to swallow reflections. The door opened with a click that sounded like a promise I didn't trust. The driver was plain in the careful way rich men's staff are. Expensive watch, cheap smile. Mr. Hale's instructions are to take you straight to the residence. Mr. Hale, I repeated, tasting the name. It gargled through my anxiety and settled like a coin at the bottom of a well. He the number? The driver said nothing, but his hands were polite with the door. He waited for me to choose to get in. Choice is a performance here. They let you act it out so they feel better about the script. I slid into the back. Leather sighed. The car swallowed the city noise. Only the blur of lights survived, smearing across the tinted window like oily rainbows. The seatbelt was soft. Someone had decided that comfort should feel like mercy. I counted my breaths to stop counting my mistakes. 1. You should have run sooner. 2. You should have run smarter. 3. You should have... The car turned. My stomach turned with it. Any expectations I should prepare for? I asked, aiming for casual, landing closer to brittle. The driver's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror and away. Mr. Hale is particular. You'll have rules. I'm great at rules. I gave a smile I didn't mean. Just not the staying alive ones. No answer. The road unfurled into quieter neighborhoods. The kind with trees that were brought in as adults and taught to stand like they'd always belonged. Gates appeared and disappeared, some ornate, others pretending not to be. When we finally slowed, the ironwork we stopped in front of looked like it could chew through a tank, let alone second thoughts. The gate recognized the car, swung open like a mouth. The driveway curved through trimmed hedges and old stone, a composition of wealth that said museum more than home. The house, no, the kind of place that makes you say residence with a capital letter, rose in breaths, glass, shadow, light, restraint. Not gaudy, just sure of itself. We stopped beneath an overhang that dripped clean water into a lined trough, like even the rain here had rules. The driver stepped out and opened my door. The night air was cool and herb-scented. Someone had planted rosemary in a soldier's formation. Inside, the driver said, "Staff is off tonight." Of course it was. Nothing says power like doing everything quietly. The foyer took my breath, but not in the way I'd expected. It smelled like cedar and book dust, not perfume. The floor was dark stone, polished, but not wearing a mirror's face. A staircase climbed with the kind of confidence that doesn't look back to see if you're following. On the left, A long hall breathed low with lamps. On the right, the suggestion of a library. A glimpse of spines, the quiet gravitas of leather and paper. I waited for footsteps hard enough to bruise. None came. The silence here had a heartbeat, but it wasn't loud. It was attentive. He was already there. I heard him before I saw him. The soft burr of a suit jacket settling, the weight of presence entering a room the way weather does, felt before it's described. When he stepped into the light, I catalogued him out of habit. Tall, broad shoulders that his suit didn't dare argue with. Dark hair, precise without vanity. His face was made for composure, angles that could turn severe if he wanted. His eyes were the surprise. Not the bright hunting kind I'd braced for, but a cool gray that took in details like they might matter later. An alpha, yes, no scent needed to tell me that. Authority is a dialect bones understand, but the violence I'd prepared for was absent, leashed, no, not even leashed. Chosen against. Mr. Hale? I said, because naming monsters makes them smaller, and because he didn't feel like one, and that scared me more. He nodded. Samuel is fine. His voice was low and even, a note that doesn't hurry. Welcome. Welcome. The word nearly made me laugh. I swallowed the sound. Is there a fruit basket? Something at the corner of his mouth almost happened, and then didn't. No, he said, as if he'd considered answering with yes just to see what I'd do with it. There's a kitchen. And your room. The driver faded into the wall and then disappeared entirely, an art form I envied. Samuel then, gestured toward the hall. He didn't reach for me. He didn't put a hand on my arm. He kept a full meter of air, and the kind of measured pace you offer skittish animals and veterans of back rooms. Floor lamps lit as we passed, each pool of light falling across the path. And then behind us, like the house was deciding which future to show. Your room is at the end, he said. You have a bath. The door locks. The window opens to the gardens, but not enough to be unsafe. A pause long enough to mean he understood how that might land. There are clothes. If they don't fit, tell me what does. I waited for the rest. The ownership clauses wrapped in pleasantries. The reminder of what I'd been purchased for. I waited for the casual menace. When it didn't arrive, my nerves scrambled to invent it. At the door, white, simple, he stopped. He looked at me fully then. Not like an item to be stored, but like a person he was trying to read without breaking the page. There are 3 rules, he said. No one enters without knocking. You eat when you wish, in or out of your room. And he hesitated. It was so slight I could have missed it if I weren't starving for proof that he was human. I don't touch what isn't mine by choice, he finished. The sentence arranged itself in my head, calm and clean, and then detonated in a way that didn't leave shrapnel. Not mine. By choice. The grammar of freedom, in a place built to conjugate ownership. Heat climbed up my throat, confusing enough to embarrass me. I deflected, sharp as habit. You bought me. His eyes didn't flinch. I bought a contract. He held my gaze the way you hold an edge. Firm. Careful. You are not a contract. For a moment everything was too loud. My pulse in my ears, the quiet of the house ringing. I thought about the number on the screen, the gavel, the leather seat. I thought about all the rooms I'd been in where kindness was the bait on a hook. I thought too about how my feet had stopped bracing for impact. He handed me a key card. If you need anything, there's a bell by the bed. Push it once. I'll come, or I'll send a message, whichever you prefer. You take requests? I asked before I could help myself. I try, he said. Then, as if he were cataloging me as thoroughly as I had him, rest. Everything else can wait until morning. He turned to go, and panic, a small mean thing, scratched at my ribs. Wait, I said, the word out before it asked permission. I didn't know what I wanted to ask. Why? How long? What's the catch? If I don't press the bell, then I won't come, he answered, and the simplicity of it almost hurt. Good night, Tian. He left. The door clicked closed. The room exhaled. I locked it. I locked it again. I didn't check the window yet. The bed was too soft, the lamp too warm, the closet too considerate. Shirts in muted colors, pants that looked like they wouldn't care if I spilled tea on them. A stack of books on the nightstand, spines uncracked, essays, a novel, a cookbook with a ribbon tucked at soups. The bathroom mirror caught me at a kinder angle than the auctions had. I didn't trust it either. I sat on the edge of the bed, palms flat against the coverlet, and listened for the sound of footsteps changing their mind. Nothing. Just the distant tick of a clock, and the slow settling of a house that didn't move unless you asked it to. Fear is a habit. So is hunger. So is bracing. My body rehearsed all three and found no cue. Resterianost slid in, where panic had stood. Shaky and ridiculous. Relief crept after it, quiet and suspicious of itself, like a stray cat wondering if the porch light meant food or a trap. I lay back, fully clothed, the key card under my pillow like a talisman I didn't believe in yet. I stared at the ceiling and tried to count the seams between the panels. Sleep didn't come, but something gentler did. A kind of space inside my chest where the walls weren't touching. They sold me to a number, and a man opened a door and handed me a key. I didn't understand why he hadn't touched me. But for the first time in months, I didn't have to understand to breathe. Morning found me with my shoes still on. At some point in the night, exhaustion had cut the cord on my vigilance, but my body had staged a protest, sleeping like a soldier on the edge of enemy territory. Every muscle still remembered how to flinch first, ask questions never. The room looked different in daylight. Big windows let in a pale wash of sun, the kind that didn't warm you right away but made shadows honest. There was a wardrobe in one corner. Doors open just enough to show rows of folded clothes, in neutral colors, all my size, as if someone had guessed the shape of me before I arrived. A stack of towels waited by the bathroom door like obedient soldiers. I explored the way you explore anything new when you've been owned before. Touching nothing. Eyes doing all the work. The bathroom was bigger than the place I used to rent before everything went wrong. White tile, silver fixtures, a mirror too clean to be trusted. The kind of room built for people who had never scrubbed anything in their lives. Back in the bedroom, I opened the wardrobe properly. Shirts, pants, even underwear, tags still on. I checked the labels like they might tell me what kind of man Samuel was. Cotton, linen. No silk, no leather. Practical fabrics in practical colors. A pair of soft gray slippers waited on the floor. Somehow, that detail hit harder than the bed. Slippers. Like he expected me to stay long enough for cold floors to matter. I was still processing that when the door knocked once. Firm, not loud. "Come in," I said automatically, and then realized what that meant. I stood up too quickly. Samuel opened the door just wide enough for himself. Today he wasn't in a suit. Dark sweater, sleeves pushed to his forearms, quiet jeans. Like the house, he managed to look expensive without trying. "Breakfast," he said simply. I searched his face for the part where this turned into an order. It didn't. Down the hall the floors didn't creak. The walls held paintings that didn't shout for attention. This was wealth that didn't need witnesses. The kitchen smelled like coffee and bread warm enough to make my stomach betray me with a growl I pretended didn't happen. He gestured at the table. Eggs, toast, fruit, all of it arranged like a magazine ad for normal lives. "You can eat here," he said, "or in your room. No one will bother you." I sat slowly, suspicious of generosity dressed like routine. "What's the catch?" "No catch." He poured coffee into a second mug and set it near me. "There are 3 rules. Here it comes," I thought. The fine print, in a human voice. 1, he said. No one comes into your room without knocking. 2, meals are at 7, noon, and 6. Join or don't, as you like. And 3, my tone was sharper than needed, like a blade testing air. His gaze held mine without flinching. "This contract doesn't require you to share a bed, or anything else you don't want to." I blinked. Once, twice. The words landed like they'd gotten lost on the way to somewhere believable. "No forced quality time?" I asked. "None," he said. "You always this fun at parties?" "I don't go to parties." A beat. Too loud. Against my will, my mouth twitched like it might be thinking about smiling. He didn't comment, just sat across from me with his own coffee, the picture of someone who could wait out silence for a living. I tried the toast. It was warm, crisp, buttered, like someone cared. Finally, I said what had been pacing my skull since last night. "So you bought me, and don't want anything?" His expression didn't shift. "I didn't buy you. I bought the contract to make sure no one else did." That should have cleared things up. It didn't. It made questions multiply like insects under a rock. He stood, rinsed his cup in the sink, and left me with food and confusion in equal portions. The house was quiet again after he went. Too quiet to be a prison, too big to be a home. But curiosity, that sneaky stupid thing, had started knocking under my ribs. The third morning smelled like bread again. By now, I knew the house had rhythms. The lamps blinked awake in the hall at exactly 6:30. A delivery truck hummed past the gates at 7. And somewhere around 7:15, someone in this mansion insisted on filling it with the kind of warmth kitchens aren't supposed to have when no family lives here. I hovered by the doorway, half ready to retreat with a plate back to my room like I had the day before. Samuel stood by the stove, sleeves rolled up, a skillet in one hand. He didn't look up, but the corner of his mouth made a barely there movement. "You can sit." I crossed to the table like it might be a trap. "You cook?" "Occasionally." His voice stayed even. "Keeps the staff from feeling useful." "Cruel," I said, sliding into a chair. The skillet landed on the counter with a soft scrape. Eggs, toast, something that looked suspiciously like sautéed spinach. It was too decent to be an accident. He poured tea into 2 mugs, set one by my elbow, then finally sat across from me like this was just breakfast. Like we were 2 ordinary people, and not a contract stitched together by money and bad timing. I picked up the mug in, too fast, too suspicious of peace, and the steam bit my fingers before I could pretend otherwise. The cup clattered down. Damn. Samuel didn't flinch. He sipped his own tea with an expression that belonged in a boardroom. "Hot things," he said deadpan, "tend to be hot." Surprising, isn't it? It was so dry, so unshaken, that it punched a laugh out of me before I could stop it. And then, God help him, he smiled. Not much, not wide. Just enough to look like the sun had cracked through storm clouds no one believed were temporary. The sound in my chest startled me. I hadn't laughed in months, maybe longer. It felt rusty, wrong, and right at the same time. We ate after that. Not in silence exactly. More like the space where silence used to live had learned to breathe. He asked if I liked the tea. I said it tasted like leaves with ambition. He said my vocabulary was alarming for someone underfed. I told him hunger makes poets out of everyone. Later, when the plates were empty, he surprised me again. "There's a garden," he said. "Behind the house." I followed him outside into air that smelled like rosemary and damp earth. The paths curved between hedges cut too neatly to be wild, but birds still darted through the branches like they hadn't read the rules. We walked. No purpose. No destination. He told me about a book he'd read, non-fiction, something about old trade routes and forgotten cities. I told him once, years ago, I'd wanted to see the ocean from the other side of the world. He didn't ask why I hadn't. He didn't fill the space with anything unnecessary. By the time the sun started folding itself behind the trees, the house felt different. Not home, not yet, but less like a cage. Like maybe, under enough breakfasts and sarcastic tea accidents, the walls would start learning how to be something else. The house had a library I hadn't explored yet. One evening, curiosity shoved me through its double doors when no one was around to tell me otherwise. Rows of shelves rose high enough to make me feel smaller than usual, lined with books that smelled faintly of dust and leather, and lives I hadn't lived. A fire flickered in the hearth, like it had been waiting for company. I wasn't the only one there. A man I didn't recognize, gray at the temples, coat slung carelessly over a chair, stood by one of the shelves. He was older than Samuel, but carried himself the same way, like someone who had walked through enough fire to know which burns to ignore. He looked up when I came in. "You must be Tian." I nodded, wary out of habit. You're an old friend, he said simply. Call me Mark. He slid a book back into place, his eyes sharp in the firelight. Samuel mentioned you, did he? My voice came out flatter than I meant. Mark studied me for a moment. Don't take his silences personally. He wasn't always like this. I tilted my head. What changed him? The older man hesitated, as though weighing how much to say to someone he'd just met. Then he sighed. There was another. Before you, something tightened in my chest before I could name it. Another, Omega? Mark nodded once. It ended badly. The way he said it carried weight. Like a stone dropped into water too deep to see the bottom. I didn't ask for details. Some things announced themselves without needing pictures. Before I could speak again, the door opened. Samuel stepped in, jacket off, sleeves rolled. He froze when he saw us, eyes flicking from Mark to me, then to the fire. You're telling stories, he said, voice low. Just context, Mark murmured. He should know. Samuel didn't answer right away. He crossed to the window, hands in his pockets, posture made of control. Finally he said, he died. The words fell heavy, like they weren't used to being outside his mouth. I waited. Samuel's eyes stayed on the dark glass, his reflection faint beside the firelight. Another alpha hurt him. I wasn't there. I should have been. He paused, jaw tight. I didn't protect him. And I will not. His voice clipped, steadied. Make the same mistake twice. Mark excused himself quietly, leaving us alone with the fire and the shadows it threw against the books. Samuel turned then, finally meeting my eyes. There was nothing cold about him in that moment. Only something that looked too much like regret wearing a mask of composure. I didn't know what to say. So I said nothing. And maybe that was the right answer. Because he gave a small nod, like silence was the only language he trusted not to lie. Something shifted between us then. Not loudly. Not enough to name yet. But the walls around him didn't look as high as before. And for the first time, I wondered if I wanted to climb them. The night smelled like rain that had changed its mind. I found Samuel in the garden, sitting on the stone bench where the path curved toward the old oak. Lamps along the edges threw soft circles of light across the grass, enough to see the sharp line of his shoulders against the dark. He didn't turn when I walked up. But I knew he heard me. He always did. Couldn't sleep? He asked. Something like that. My voice came out thinner than I wanted. Silence, stretched. The wind pushed through the leaves, carrying the faint scent of rosemary from the kitchen garden. I sat beside him, before I lost my nerve. Close, but not touching. My hands rested on my knees like they didn't know what else to do. Samuel? He glanced at me. Yes? I swallowed, words crowding my throat. Can I choose? His brow furrowed slightly. Choose what? When? I said. My fingers tightened. When to let you touch me. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then he nodded once, careful, like sudden gestures might scare me off. Yes, he said quietly. You can choose. We sat like that for a long time, long enough for the garden lights to hum faintly and the wind to change direction. Finally, I turned my hand over on my knee, palm up. A small, stupid gesture. My chest felt too tight. He didn't move until I whispered, now. His fingers brushed mine, slow enough to retreat if I flinched. I didn't. Okay? He asked. Yes. The warmth of his hand slid carefully against my own, like he was learning the shape of permission. When I didn't pull away, he let out a breath. I don't think he realized he was holding. It wasn't much, that first touch, just fingers against fingers, still enough to hear the night sounds between our hands. But then, I turned my palm and let him hold it properly. Okay? He asked again. Yes, I said, softer this time. We didn't look at each other, not yet. The air felt fragile, like words might break it. His thumb traced across the back of my hand once, twice. I laughed under my breath, nerves leaking out sideways. What? He murmured. Feels like we're signing a treaty, I said. The corner of his mouth tilted. Are we? Maybe. My laugh came easier now. The tension bled out slowly, replaced by something warmer, something that didn't feel like a mistake. I let him wrap an arm around my shoulders after that. Let my head fall against him, when the night leaned quieter. "Okay?" he asked again, voice close to my hair. "Yes," I whispered. The oak leaves shivered above us. I felt his breath move slow against my temple. My body, traitorous and tired, decided it wasn't scared anymore. "I'm not afraid," I said finally, words catching. "Not now. Because you're here." His arm tightened just enough to answer without words. And for the first time since the auction, I believed myself when I said it. I asked him in the living room. The fire was low, the kind that barely glowed, and Samuel was seated at the desk in the corner, papers arranged in perfect geometry around his hands. He didn't look up right away when I stepped inside. "Samuel?" I said, voice steadier than I felt. He glanced up then, gray eyes waiting. "I want the contract gone," I said. "I don't want to belong to anyone. Not even you." Silence swallowed the air between us. For a second, I thought he might argue, that he'd tell me all the reasons I wasn't ready, or that he needed time, or that this house was the only safe place I had. But he didn't. Instead, Samuel opened the drawer, pulled out the papers, and signed them with the same composure he used for everything else in this life. A clean, dark stroke of ink on white. When he slid the papers across the table, his voice was calm, but too even. "You're free." That was it. No protests. No chains rattling on the floor. Only freedom. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, something tight pulled at my ribs. He walked me to the gates himself. The night pressed cold against the garden walls, the air sharp with early autumn. "You have money?" he asked. "Yes." "Somewhere to stay?" "Yes." He nodded once, like each answer was another door closing behind me. I hesitated. "You're not going to stop me?" His expression didn't change. Why would I stop someone who doesn't want to stay? It was fair. Brutal in its fairness. I left anyway. The city swallowed me for 3 whole days. It was louder than I remembered, full of elbows and neon and strangers who didn't care if you stopped breathing on the sidewalk. I stayed in a rented room above a bakery that smelled like burnt sugar. I ate noodles from paper cups, and told myself I was free. And I was. No gates, no rules, no gray-eyed man who signed away ownership like it burned his hands. But freedom, it turned out, was lonelier than I expected. By the 4th night, I caught myself watching the rain on the window and thinking about the house that wasn't a cage, and the man who hadn't touched me until I asked him to. I came back on the 5th day. Samuel was in the same room, at the same desk, like nothing had moved since I left except time. When he saw me in the doorway, he froze, just for a moment, but didn't speak. I crossed the room until the firelight reached both of us. My hands shook once before I made them still. "I don't want the contract," I said. "Not anymore." He nodded slowly. "You made that clear." I stepped closer. "I want you. Not the papers, not the rules, just you. Because I choose to." The breath he let out wasn't even. Not like his signature had been. For the first time since I'd met him, Samuel looked unsteady. And for the first time since the auction, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Morning smelled like coffee instead of paperwork. Samuel was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, hair mussed like sleep had argued with him and lost. He poured 2 mugs without asking. Mine already knew how much sugar I liked. "Careful," he said as he handed it over. "Still hot." "Tragic," I muttered, blowing on the steam. "The last time you warned me about tea, I nearly set my hand on fire." His mouth tilted into something that might have been a smile. "Operator error. Lack of sympathy," I shot back. He raised his mug in mock salute. "Freedom comes with risks." I rolled my eyes but drank anyway. The day unfolded without ceremony. No rules. No schedule. Just us. We walked through the city later, not rushing anywhere in particular. The autumn air bit pleasantly at our cheeks. Leaves skittering along the sidewalks like they had somewhere to be. I stopped to buy roasted chestnuts from a street vendor. Samuel leaned against the cart. watching me burn my fingers on the paper cone like he'd seen this movie before. "Hot things," he said. "Don't you dare." He smirked into his coffee and didn't say the line. For once, the world didn't feel like it was closing in. That evening, back at the house, home, my mind corrected automatically. We sat in the garden with the last of the sun painting the sky copper and violet. We talked about the future, not about contracts, about trips we might take, books he wanted to show me, a corner of the garden I wanted to turn into something bright and alive come spring. It felt normal, in the best way. When the lamps flickered on and the air cooled, I realized I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop anymore. There was no shoe, no trap, just him, us, and the space we'd built between two people who had been strangers in every way that mattered, until they weren't. I looked at him then. At the man who had bought me with money but never with force, who had waited for permission instead of taking what was never his. "He bought me like property," I said softly, almost to myself. Samuel's brow furrowed slightly, but I shook my head, smiling as the words finished themselves. "But he became the only place where I'm free." The wind moved through the trees like it agreed, and for the first time in longer than I could measure, I believed in tomorrow.